Tonight, on the Ropen Network, something terrifying descended upon the quiet hills of Flatwoods, West Virginia. 7 witnesses, most of them kids, claimed they saw a fiery object streak across the sky and crash into a nearby hillside. When they went to investigate, they encountered a towering figure nearly 10 feet tall, with glowing eyes, a space-shaped head, and a metallic body that was straight out of a science fiction movie. Was it an alien? A government experiment? 73 years later, the mystery still haunts Braxton, West Virginia. A flash of light, smoke, and then silence. For those who say they saw it, they say it was a monster. Others, something else. Tonight we visit what put Flatwoods on the map, the Flatwoods Monster. Join us, and perhaps you too will believe.
There's a good chance we're dealing with an organic creature, or we're dealing with a supernatural entity.
Pterosaurs, according to evolution, have been extinct for 70 million years or so.
Our objective to research information that describes the truth about the entire cosmos.
And the name of the business is SJ Polygraph, which is directly behind me, where the examination will be taking place.
There's very good evidence that is indicating that they still are alive.
Tucked deep in the Appalachian hills of Braxton County lies a town most folks have never heard of, Flatwoods, West Virginia. A quiet place, surrounded by thick forests, winding roads, and haulers that hold on to fog like secrets. This is coal country, hard land, good people. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and nothing strange ever really happens. Until it did. It was a quiet Friday evening, September 12, 1952. The sky dimmed, the crickets started their song, and the town settled into its usual rhythm. But then, a streak of fire shot across the sky. Bright, fast, unnatural. Witnesses called it a meteor. Others weren't so sure. That glowing object descended behind a ridge, just beyond the Bailey Fisher farm. Drawn by curiosity, a group formed. 2 adults and 5 teenage boys. Among them, Kathleen May, a local mother, and Jean Lemon, a young National Guardsman. They climbed the hill, hearts pounding. They expected to find wreckage. Instead, they found it, towering, at least 10 feet tall. The creature didn't walk. It glided. It let out a piercing hiss. A sulfurous mist filled the air. The group panicked. Some collapsed, coughing, eyes stinging. Others ran in fear. Many of the witnesses fell ill. Burning throats, nausea, and watery eyes. And just like that, the figure disappeared into the night. What was it? An alien? A machine? A government secret? The day after the Flatwoods sighting, the nation's attention was fixed. News crews, National Guard presence, whispers in every doorway. Once the media caught wind of the encounter, Eugene Lemon and Kathleen May gave a statement to the local news. They even provided their own description of the creature, which was later dubbed the Flatwoods Monster. Flatwoods would never be the same, and what few people realize is that the story didn't end there. This time, the eyewitnesses were George and Edith Snitowski, along with their 18-month-old son. The Snitowskis were driving home after an errand. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, stalled, and refused to restart. As George raised the hood and examined the engine, Edith sat with their son. Then, a foul, sulfurous odor drifted through the air. A strange, brilliant light suddenly flickered across the darkness. A towering figure emerged in front of the car, nearly 10 feet tall, suspended above the road. But it was unlike the armored entity seen the night before. From the waist down, it glided in the same lower torso apparatus. No metal suit, no spade-shaped hood. Instead, its upper body appeared reptilian and skeletal, with hardened, bony skin. George scrambled back into the car. Its arms were elongated, ending in slender clawed digits, which it slowly dragged across the hood of the car. The touch was soft, but unmistakable. Edith froze in terror, cradling their baby. As the creature paused at the windshield, as if studying them, the sulfurous smell followed and filled the cabin of the car. The car restarted on its own. No engine turn, no explanation. Just life restored as if nothing had happened. The Snitowskis sped off in panic until they reached safety. They said very little about it in the days that followed. It wasn't until July 1955, in an interview with Mail magazine, that George Snitowski detailed what they had seen. The reptilian head, 3-fingered dragging claws, and the mysterious car restart. Cryptid historians have since referred to this being as the Frametown Monster, a second phase or variant of the original Flatwoods figure. 2 consecutive nights, 2 forms. 1, a cloaked metallic apparition with a spade-shaped face. The next, a reptile-skinned, clawed humanoid drifting before a car. Both hovered, both emitted a foul mist. Was it the same creature, altered? 2 distinct beings? Was the second more vulnerable or more exposed without its armor? Or was something else entirely at play?
The RRN Ropen Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready. By Creation Evidence Museum of Texas. God's Word in 6 days. And by the Wildlife Safari, America's top cheetah breeding program. You are closer to Africa than you think.
Up next, from the quiet hills of Flatwoods to chilling eyewitness testimonies, the man preserving the legend, the network sits down with Andrew Smith, owner of the Flatwoods Monster Museum. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Ropen Network. It's a pleasure to have you here. Andrew Smith, the owner of the museum in Flatwoods, West Virginia. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I get the feeling that this creature may have been what inspired Independence Day's creations of their aliens. Am I wrong?
Well, I can't tell you if you're right or wrong, but I agree with you. The resemblance is uncanny, and I wouldn't doubt it at all if they dug a little bit deeper into the alien phenomena than just like grays or that sort of thing. It would
Yeah.
make sense that they would want a more unique looking creature in their film, so that way it could stand out, and also a really big, scary, monstrous alien works a whole lot better in a film like that than like a little gray would. So it makes
It does, yeah.
sense. But whether or not there is direct relation, I actually have no idea. But I've often thought about
Okay.
it as well.
What got you started in the museum? Where did this all begin? What's it like to own a museum devoted to a creature like this? And how did it begin for you? Tell me about that.
Okay. Well, I actually should start off saying that I don't actually own the museum, but I do run it. It's
Okay.
basically my baby. It's my creation, but I don't own it. So the
Hmm.
museum is a project of the Braxton County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and what that came out of was something that I say we, but really that I noticed going back even to about 2013 when I first got hired with the organization, is that anytime I would talk to visitors, I shouldn't say the majority, but a lot of visitors that I talked to the area were interested in the Flatwoods Monster, and it just kind of became more and more apparent over time that the interest in the Flatwoods Monster was not being um, was not being satiated. Like
Mm.
people's
Sensationalized, yeah.
yeah were it was just not being met. And it started kind of little by little. We had a little project here, a little project there, and then it culminated in 2018 with the moving of our office and then what would be the Flatwoods Monster Museum to Main Street in Sutton, West Virginia, which is just
Mm.
it's just a couple miles away from Flatwoods, um, and
Okay.
so our collection just grew and grew, and so like I said, so the Flatwoods Monster Museum is a project of the Braxton County Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then personally, my history with the Flatwoods Monster goes back to when I first moved here. In sixth grade, I would have, you know, kids. I know specifically at least once, because I can't imagine it happening more than once, that a kid would just obviously mention Flatwoods Monster and kind
Yep.
of like blow right past it. Because if you live here, especially if you're from Flatwoods, you've known about the Flatwoods Monster your whole life, and it's now
Exactly.
become a part of the scenery, and you don't even really think about it that much. But then if you're talking to a new kid about what Braxton County's like, um, you'll mention the Flatwoods Monster, and then I have to make them back up to tell me the story, or at least as good as the sixth grader that I was talking to could tell. And I
Hmm.
actually didn't really get really invested in the story. I've always known about it, I've always been curious about it, but I never really got invested in the story until around like 2013, 2014. You would think my favorite or the cryptid I was most invested in would be the Flatwoods Monster, and I guess by now that's the case. But but the one that sits in my heart far more deeply is air rods. I'm sure you've heard of air rods. And what was funny is that came from watching I think it was an Unsolved Mysteries whenever I was a kid, and it talked about air rods, and then I was blown away I was mesmerized by the footage and this sort of thing. And of course, that episode they didn't get to the bottom of it, and it stuck with me so much
Of
that
course not.
I would bring it up a lot to people because I would assume something so weird and fantastic, everybody had heard about it, but pretty much nobody had ever heard of this. And I was always desperate to bring it up to see if any ground had been gained. And this was all pre-internet.
Hmm.
And, and I couldn't ever find anything out. And then the series, I believe it was on History Channel, Monster Quest, was the series that I watched all the time. This was probably when I was in high school, I would imagine maybe middle school. Um, and I watched that series pretty religiously. And when I saw that they were, I seen a promo for where the upcoming episode was going to be about rods. I was so excited because finally something is talking about rods. But I was
Yep.
so disappointed because none of these shows ever get to the bottom of anything. And
No, they don't.
that episode seems to get to the bottom of rods. And
Really?
I was pretty disappointed and pretty upset. So I won't spoil it for anybody that wants to look into it. But it's
Yeah, check that out.
if you're really excited about rods, it might disappoint you.
What we're trying to do here in Salem is we're looking to open our first North American pterosaur museum. Now,
Okay.
that's going to be a tough act here in Salem. I've already talked to the Visitor Association, and they love the idea. It's just that when they find out who we really are, what we believe, they tend to be dismissive about it. And they said, okay, you're probably better off doing it on your own property. I
Mm,
think that's probably reigns true. But I'd like to understand this or get a perspective for someone who helps run a museum.
okay.
What advice can you share with me that could potentially help me if I'm looking to embark in this?
Well, I would say we were really lucky, and then also the circumstances were kind of perfect. So, like I said, I needed we needed to move locations for where our office and visitor center was going to be housed, and our organization was lucky enough to be setting on a pretty decent little surplus of cash. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And in this building that we're in, which is at 208 Main Street in Sutton, it was available. My board of directors really wanted a visitor center on a Main Street location in Braxton County, and Sutton is the county seat, so it kind of made a lot of sense. But the space is big, and you may even be able to pick it up on your end. I'm echoing in here a little bit. It's kind of cavernous. It's a big place, even though it's full of.
Mhm.
Um, but in my mind, it was overkill for a visitor center. Well, in talking to my board, I said, why don't why, if we do this, if we decide to buy this building and this is where we're going to house our visitor center, since it's so much space, let's have it be dual rolled and have it be a Flatwoods Monster Museum. And by this point, we had already had probably 3 or 4 years of history with doing, like I said, little projects that involved the Flatwoods Monster, and we knew that people were interested enough that it would be, that it would be worth doing. We didn't know to what degree, so that's why we did what we did. Um, so
I see.
what I would say though is what also helped is like in Braxton County, for the most part, real estate tends to not be real expensive. So we were able, rather than paying rent month after month like we had before, we found this building being offered at a good price, and we were able to even negotiate a better price. So we bought our building free and clear. So that means we can do whatever we want with it. Now,
Exactly. Yeah.
maybe your local, what would be maybe a similar organization, your local visitor center. Um, yeah, since it's not like their idea and you're bringing it to them, I could see it being a little bit of a harder sell. Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I would maybe just look at what it would cost to secure the space you need. Figure out how much space you need. Um, maybe try to find some optimum locations, see what it would cost to secure them,
Because I often thought about this. I didn't embark on this to sell merchandise, but I got a lot of people contacting me saying, "Hey, I really like your logo. Can I get a shirt?"
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't really think about that before, but I guess I better. And
Well,
it's like, hey,
people love. I mean, what I've found, and it shouldn't be so surprising because I'm exactly the same way. People
yeah,
love wearing their lifestyle, on their chest and with stickers on their cars and kind of broadcasting almost as a way to talk. If you're just walking past somebody and you don't actually talk to them, you say, "Hey, I know what that is," and now you might have an instant friend. And
exactly.
it just seems like people are getting more and more and more specific. So yeah, so as you said, on September 12th, 1952, it was later in the evening, for sure after 6 o'clock. There were a whole, actually, from what I've heard, was a whole bunch of kids playing around the Flatwoods Elementary School. There was just like this big open lawn, and area kids would just come and play there because for even though it's called Flatwoods, very very little of Flatwoods is flat. It's mostly not flat. It's mostly pretty steep. So
That's what I figured.
yeah, so the flat land that there was, was right for playing on, especially if it was public, like at a school. So a whole bunch of kids were playing around the area, and while they were playing, they notice an object streak through the sky, and depending on what you read, either appear to land or crash on a nearby hilltop that was about a quarter mile away, um,
Mm.
which would be north from where they were at the school. And five of the boys decided they wanted to go check out whatever this was. And the oldest of which being 15 and the youngest being 9. And then also in this group were two brothers, excuse me, Ed and Freddie May. And
Hmm.
they were 13 and 11, respectively. So they went, all these boys went running up this hill, and they were going to pass the May boys' home. So they stopped, and because their mother was home, they stopped and told their mother, Kathleen May, who was 32 at the time, "Hey, we just saw this thing come through the sky. We want to go up and see what it is." And because she knew they were going to be getting on somebody else's property, she decided she better join them. And her cousin was also visiting a neighbor, Gene Lemon, who was an Army recruit as well. So I believe he had gone through basic training, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
how much deeper he had been. So anyway, or he may have even been in the National Guard. Sometimes I mess that up, but he was younger, but
Okay.
still. So anyway, these 7 people, were trekking up this hill and involved, jumping some fences, and as they're getting to the top of the hill where they presume this thing ended up, they were greeted in the woods by what they described as being a roughly 10-foot tall creature of some sort. Some say object, but at the time they definitely said, some sort of creature that stood, like I said, about 10 feet tall, had like a red, for lack of a better term, head face with this spade shape that went behind it. As a matter of fact, let me pause real quick.
Sure.
Grab one of our
Got something to show us?
Flatwoods Monster Lanterns. So this was made in the likeness of the Flatwoods Monster. I don't know how terribly accurate it is, but this has been around since the 1960s. But anyway, they described it as having this red head with 2 eyes or features that resemble,
Hmm.
and then the spade shape behind it. And then it's kind of a mystery from what you would call the neck down. In some
Okay.
writings, it talks about it being green, as it's represented here. Sometimes it's metallic, sometimes it's black, which
Okay.
kind of makes sense to me if it's reflecting the forest. Like, say, if it is metallic and it's reflecting the forest, those
Yeah.
are probably the colors you're going to get. But anyhow, so they see something probably that doesn't quite look this nice um, in the woods, and it seemed like as they noticed it noticed them and began coming toward them. and it scared the daylights out of them. And they turned and ran down the hill and called the local emergency number. And before too long, our local sheriff's deputy, and the man that actually ran our county jail all showed up to go up on the property to check out what they saw, to take witness statements, and that sort of thing.
Interesting how they got quickly involved because a lot of people say, "Oh, stop it. You're pulling our legs or whatever." Did they actually come out and say what they saw, Andrew?
The witnesses.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, they did, but like I said, it was to the best of their description, and the
Okay.
way I just described it, at least at that time, the way they were describing it is it would have been more or less that loose. Like, it wouldn't have been incredibly detailed. Um,
Okay.
it would have been in general. I'd say what the the first responders, what they probably got from the crowd more than really descriptions is that sort of thing, is probably just the impression of that they're frightened, and that they were genuinely frightened, so that there's probably something to it. Because
Yeah.
like with most small towns, most people either know everybody, or you are familiar with them. So like Kathleen May, she had
Mm,
a beauty shop where she did hairdressing and hair cutting and that sort of stuff. So she was well known and well liked in the area. She was also involved with a fraternal organization that did civic work all over the area. So she was known, and I think the boys were pretty known too, and were known to be pretty truthful and fairly upstanding.
level-headed.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
when you have these people saying this is what we saw, it bears a whole lot more credence. So they definitely didn't write it off. They went and checked it out,
I love
and
that. Yeah.
I actually got to interview the jailer that I mentioned. I got to interview his daughter, and
Mm.
she was 14 at the time, and she told me that she was actually the one that answered the call when Kathleen May called in, and that she said she was very scared on the phone.
I was under the impression as well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they did experience some sort of symptoms from this, some
Yeah,
sort of gas that was being, but maybe emitting from this creature's body or something
yeah,
that caused symptoms. And I have burning sensations,
yeah.
vomiting, skin irritation, swelling of the throat, and convulsions in some cases. Some reportedly sought medical attention soon after. Is this correct?
Yeah, so Gene Lemon, I believe, was the one that was affected the most. And the way that I understand it, he more or less led the pack. So his exposure probably would have been the highest. So
Yeah.
yes, there was some sort of gas lingering in the air that did cause irritation of the nose and throat. It did cause vomiting. I think, not all of them, but I think a couple did vomit, including Gene. And he did eventually seek medical care, maybe that night or the next day. But I don't know if anything conclusive ever came from that. And
Okay.
it's kind of assumed that what they experienced, that it was connected, because it was unusual. Because those kids played in the woods and those hills all the time, and that was
Sure.
not normal. So the assumption is that it was together. I don't know if they physically, saw it, emit from, the actual monster, or if it just if it coincided, and therefore most likely it was related. Um,
Sure.
Now, I will say there are some old writings that talk about that exposure killed their family dog, and
Mm.
it didn't, as far as I've been able to figure out. That the only dog that would have or could have been present would have been the May family dog. And according to Freddie May, who I got to know quite well before his passing a couple years ago, he said that
Mhm.
the dog that they had continued to live as old as dogs
Okay.
typically do. So uh, so like what that was, or what that exposure was, I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
Kathleen May ended up living into her 90s. She died in 2009.
It's a
I
long
would
time.
say. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Freddie, and maybe some of the other people have too. I'm not sure, but I know that Freddie had cancer off and on in his life, and I know
Oh,
a lot of people wonder if it could have had anything to do with, you know, whatever they could have been exposed to at the time.
Maybe.
But it, it's also so far removed. It would be hard to pinpoint.
But then you have skeptics come in and say, "Oh, they didn't see anything like this. They were
Yeah.
just exposed to something that had leaked underground." You've probably heard all of the,
Yeah.
discussions about the theories, theoretical ideas. Give us a few that you've heard.
Well, so yeah, there was a thought that it was some sort of like just natural gas line that maybe had ruptured.
Broken.
Or it was a working. It was small, but it was a working farm. So there had been some thoughts that maybe they were, they came onto or into something that would relate to either the equipment there or maybe the fertilizer, something like that.
But something that would cause hallucinations?
Well, so I don't think to where it would cause hallucinations, but I guess that's possible. But I've
Mm,
even been told that a local theory anyway that some locals had cooked up. It was kind of funny. In this area around the time when that took place, all the locals kind of seemed to align themselves into one of two camps. It was either like whatever they saw, or anything we can come up with that could be an explanation is what happened, and they're just kooky. There's basically these two camps, and one was
as a
that they misidentified a John Deere tractor as the Flatwoods Monster. So so that was something that came out of it, and I I struggle to believe that, um, but
yeah.
but it was interesting that. Uh, but yeah, so locals have came up with their own skeptical theories, which I actually even almost find humorous. And then there's a lot of skeptics, that don't live here that have also looked into the case as well to come up with their own
Yeah.
explanations. So whether it's all the way back to, Project Blue Book, or all the way up into,
Mm,
who sadly recently, passed, Joe Nickel. He had, his thoughts and that sort of thing. So yeah, it seems like the skeptical theories just run the gamut from as preposterous as it gets to, to fairly plausible. The only thing that I know is that, like I said, I knew Freddie May quite well, and I know that none of the skeptical explanations ever held enough water for him to think that
yeah.
that's what he saw.
So tell me about this second event that was involved three individuals, maybe husband and wife and child.
Yes.
That happened the next day, didn't it?
Yeah. So I always kind of like to broach this story with a caveat of, I don't, to me, this story doesn't hold near the water that the September 12th case carries. And there's a couple
Mm,
reasons for that. One, and I'll get into the story itself in a second, but one is it wasn't reported on until 3 years after the incident. So plenty of time
correct.
to cook something
1975.
up. And
Yeah.
as well as it was only reported in like what I would have essentially call like a boys action adventure magazine that
Right.
that would that sells its books based off of fantastic tales. So it wasn't really through a more what I would call legitimate, news source or journalist. But all that being said, so that's the story of George and Edith Snatowski, who were traveling, according to the story, between Cleveland, Ohio, and New York City. And on their route, it brought them through rural West Virginia, and um, and took them through his claim of the story takes place between the towns of Clay, West Virginia, and Sutton, West Virginia. And if you ever look that up, that especially if you look at like
Yeah.
a world map, that looks very close. But that's about a 40-mile stretch, maybe even more. Um, so anyway, and what's funny is the first time I ever read that is I read that as preposterous that they would be coming through there. But when I looked it up on Google Maps and plotted the most direct
Mhm.
route, if you remove interstates, because at the time interstates didn't exist, it actually took you really close by Google Maps anyway. It took you really close, and if I moved the if I moved the route through where he claimed he went, it only added 40 minutes to the whole trip. So if you were just looking at a map, it's conceivable you could have went through.
Okay.
Sure. So anyway, so they're traveling through the area, and it's George and Edith and their small child in the back seat. The way I believe it's supposed to be an infant. So
Yeah.
they're driving down the road. They experience car trouble, and their engine stops. So they stop along the side of the road, and while George is checking on the engine to see if there's anything wrong, Edith notices movement from behind him and describes this tall, scary, and almost like reptilian looking creature coming up behind him. And once he notices it, he gets inside the car and basically puts the baby at the bottom of the pile in the back, his wife, and then him. And as they're laying in the car, he looked up and he said that he saw this creature, whatever it was, reaching out and touching the hood of his car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he hit his head again, and whenever he popped back up to look the next time, it was gone. And when he tried his car again, his car was able to start, and they hit the road. And this was at night. This was very late at night, and he claimed that he stopped at an all-night diner in Sutton and then stayed at either a hotel adjoining it or a hotel nearby for the night.
Okay.
So, but the problems with it is he describes I forgot this in the story. At some point, I can't remember exactly where, he describes like a white light, like a ball of white light in the woods beside the road that he saw expand and then go up into the sky. So there's a few problems that I've been able to see. I would actually love to get confirmation one way or the other, because keep in mind this supposedly happened in 52. I was born in 85, so it's all just trying to dig into the past. But
sure.
When I drive that road a lot. It's called Route 4, and it runs parallel to the Elk River. So in this story, he never once mentions the Elk River, and he would have driven the Elk River from Charleston all the way into Sutton. He would have been driving by the Elk River. So at no point during his story does he mention a river or body of water, which strikes me as odd. Because, within 2 weeks of when the September 12th incident took place, this story was international news. So if you were already like maybe a budding sci-fi writer at the time, there would have been plenty of time to read the original story. I kind of think of as if the original story is set to like 3, the George Natowski case, you've ramped it up to 10. But again, that's only the impression that one guy thinks. I'm not the end all be all. I don't want to say it's fake, but it just rings to me. It rings as a really interesting sci-fi story in a
sure does
in a like a War of the Worlds. Let's pretend it's.
That was going to be my next point, because we're talking about the 1950s here, where people are just starting to really accept a lot of the science fiction norm that's coming through the pipeline. Yeah, I don't remember what year War of the Worlds came out. It could have been the early 50s.
I don't know either.
Yeah. It's like, okay, it starts a craze.
Yeah.
So I can see why the skeptics would probably say, hey, look, they concocted. I still don't buy that at all. Based on the research I've done over years of different kinds of anomalies, creatures, monsters, you name it, this is not something people just make up, especially when you have a group of 7 or more that are coming forward and are scared out of their mind.
Yeah,
and they have to live with that.
Yes. What you might have seen that made you ask that was for his 100th birthday, we actually had a small event here at the museum celebrating his 100th birthday. It was planned in order.
That's what Steve was saying.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, he attended, but it was planned and organized by by some guys that go by the Moth Boys. They have a podcast
Uh-huh.
that's mostly I mean, it's centered around cryptozoology, but it's also trying to be funny, um, but
Okay.
and succeeding most of the time. And I only say that they're friends of mine. They'll be okay with me saying that. Um,
Okay.
but anyhow, so that was really cool. So we had a whole event dedicated to him, which included
Mm,
a man who was from right off the top of my head, I can't remember. I know his first name's Gabriel, but I can't remember his last name. But he was from New York State, and he had been researching Gray Barker for the last 5 or 6 years, and he wrote a book about Gray and his life. And this was his. He came for that event, and he gave a talk,
nice.
and did like a book signing. And this was his first time visiting West Virginia. And then after the event, a group of about 20 of us, so it wasn't everybody that attended, but a lot of us, went up and visited his grave site that's in Sutton. But it's about after you can finally park, which is you go up a gravel road basically to the top of the mountain. And once you park, then you have to walk about a half mile to get to the Barker Cemetery. So that was really cool that we got to go there for his 100th birthday.
Investigator further.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know a little bit about your faith. Now, I know that you are a devout Methodist. Am I wrong?
How did you know that? But
Hey, I'm an investigator. I'm supposed to do this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, that's great. So I attend a Methodist church. I don't know if I would necessarily say I'm a devout Methodist, but I'm a devout Christian. I
Good.
just happen to have found a church family at a Methodist church, and it's where
Okay.
my wife has gone her whole life. But yeah. So I found Christ again. I want to say again because I grew up going to church, but I really didn't. I mean, I really didn't know why I was there. I mean, it never really made sense until I got
Yeah.
older. But I joined the Christian faith whenever I was 26 years old, and have been
Mhm.
very active ever since. I just turned 40. So I'm very active at my church. My wife and I both are. She does a lot of children's ministry, so I end up helping her a lot with that, and I sometimes help with worship and that sort of thing. I used to play music at church a lot too, but a few years back I kind of quit, and it's been fine. I don't need to do that,
Mhm.
but yeah, I've
Good.
it was a missing part of my life for a long time. There was an experience that I had whenever I was about 12 that, although I know now what it was, that made me feel this way, but there was something in me that where I felt duped and I kind of checked out. And
Yeah.
by the time I was 14, I stopped going to church and pretty much never went back unless there was something special that my mom really wanted me to go to, or something like that. But uh, through several um, things that lined up perfectly for about a year or so until I found my way back to the faith. There was just a big hole uh, that I couldn't fill with anything, for that in that whole time.
Yeah.
And once I opened myself back up to God, it just filled immediately.
Amen.
And I've felt that way that for like since then, it's been nothing but. I mean, I'm not saying that I haven't had bad days or that sort of stuff, but
Not gonna be perfect. No.
I've never felt any further than an arm's reach away from God. Um, so yes, I've
Beautiful.
been devout in that aspect for
Good.
now 15 years.
I like hearing those stories. Yeah.
Yeah,
I had to ask because I think it's kind of like when I started with, kind of opens up the conversation. Is a lot of people in this community have asked me, I don't understand, Jake. You are a Christian Baptist. I consider myself just Christian.
yeah,
Okay. But I still affiliate with the Baptist church.
yeah,
And they say, okay, I'm confused. How can you support this field? It's dark, it's spooky. And I'm like, well, it's not always dark and spooky.
yeah.
There are things of our world that are natural,
Right.
that God created. They're still amongst us. Maybe not so many numbers. And there are things that don't belong that I believe are of the enemy.
Yeah,
And I think people need to know about these things. They need to be awakened to it. It's not as important as salvation, Okay, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But I think they need to be aware of the world around them. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
And I love hearing from people who are fellow believers who are encouraged to keep pushing forward. And for you, you have a museum that you operate
Yeah.
and you are Christian. So it's like, do you have anybody in your community say, why are you doing that? Why are you affiliated with a monster? What would be your response to that?
Well, it's funny you say that is because I always kind of expect to get that, but I don't. I don't get that, and you're probably aware, but rural West Virginia is for the most part a fairly conventional Christian community for the most part, and I don't. I think it's because I think the reason why I don't get that. So I'll answer this first. I think the reason why I don't get that kind of response is, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of locals that are familiar with the story. They were at least familiar with Kathleen May and the kids, or they knew somebody that they trust that was. So because of that, there's a lot of built-in credibility. So even though locals might not know exactly what this was, I do feel like the average local um, gives it a decent amount more credence than maybe an
Okay.
outsider might. Even if it's just that, well, it was a significant touchstone in our history. So just by that very nature, it's important. So I think that's where a lot of people sit. So I don't really get a lot of that kind of pushback. But I'll be really honest with you. If I did get that kind of pushback, I don't know exactly how I would defend myself. In all
Sure.
in all reality, I probably have worried myself about it more than anybody's done to me. There was even a time when, because there's part of me that almost wants the Flatwoods Monster to just be an interesting legend that came out of misidentification, because then
Hmm.
it becomes a lot more safe. To where if if what they did see was what appeared to be a flesh and blood monster, which I'm not trying to put those words into the victim or into the witness's mouth.
Sure.
But if they did, my faith in the Bible tells me that if that's what they saw, then there was something demonic at work. And then if so, um, how do I justify in any way appearing to glorify it? Um, which I'm not necessarily trying to glorify anything, but I still stop myself and say, well, like, do I think the Flatwoods Monster looks cool? Do I think depictions of the flat? I do. I mean, I do. I think it's cool. So that's the kind of thing that gives myself pause. Um,
Sure.
but I remember I asked my pastor probably 4 years ago. I was like, hey, is what I'm doing okay? Is this okay? I don't know if it's okay. And he said, yeah, it's okay. I said, why? Explain to me why it's okay. And he kind of went with
Mm.
the history angle. He said, well, it's an important piece of history for our area, and obviously people are fascinated by it, and you're helping keep that history alive, and make sure that other people know about it. New people know about it.
Mhm.
People that are already interested know about it. So I took that and breathed a sigh of relief. And let me tell you something else that I do, though. I'm not going to
Okay.
lie and say that we don't. And you know, we have people visit that I can just tell because of the symbols they choose to wear on their body. The T-shirts they choose to wear, the tattoos they have, whatever. That I know that they probably do not know their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Right.
They probably don't.
Yeah.
And in the position that I have, I probably can't really tell them. Like, I can't start just preaching, which I'm not good at that anyway. I've tried a few times. I'm bad at it. I am pretty good at talking though. But so I try
Yes,
to
you are.
actually be. I kind of try to be a little bit sneaky. So a thing that I do is, like, for example, I don't do this all the time, but when I remember, so like how I told you, we sell a lot of T-shirts. I'll go, go pick up a load of T-shirts that consists of like 6 boxes of shirts, and I have to bring them out of my car and put them in the back and store them and start sorting them and things like that. Well, before I do anything with them, I will often pray over them and hope, pray a blessing on anybody that buys it, wears it, that their life becomes blessed, that they see where those blessings come from, acknowledge the source of these blessings, and pay it the homage that it deserves. And the source of those blessings, as far as I'm concerned, is God.
Just to help solidify this, um, it's true that you're doing something very important for those people who saw this thing. And if what they saw was real and they're sincere about it, you're helping to keep that memory alive for them.
Yeah.
Because every eyewitness needs someone to go to, an outlet.
Yeah.
Where else can they turn? They want to tell their story and say, look, I was telling you the truth. I'm not a liar.
Yeah.
And they need someone to preserve that. That's where I think this comes in. It's important to the person. So I know I've taken a lot of your time, but before I let you go, something happened in 2004 with a hunter who may have come across this creature without its armor. And I think he saw a couple of them. How credible is this story? Now, we don't have the name of the individual. It's kind of just a report that I found online and then through watching Monster Quest.
Oh.
So it makes me wonder if this one is made up, if there's any truth to it. Who is this person? Usually when you have stories like this, I don't really like to talk about them because there's no name.
Yeah, right.
But there's an event. But such a fascinating, short-lived encounter that I have to wonder, is there any truth to it, Andrew? Do you know about this one?
No, what's funny is I'd actually forgotten about it until you mentioned Monster Quest.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually don't, other than what would have been shared on Monster Quest, I have no idea. I don't know anything about, outside of that, I don't know anything more.
Makes me wonder where they found it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I wonder if Frank Fascino might know about it because he was on that show, but I don't know if they mentioned anything because whenever he showed up and did his on location research, he was where the sighting took place. So he wasn't anywhere, in some other part for a new encounter. So he might not
Yeah.
be familiar with it outside of that episode.
I love the event that you did for Gray Barker. That was amazing. So Jeff Walmsley came down and Steve Ward as well.
No, Jeff couldn't come, but his son-in-law,
Okay.
came. And we were lucky enough too. I think we had 4 relatives of Gray that still live in the area. They were able to come, and they really liked seeing that these people came from all over. We had people from out of state, that sort of stuff. We had people from all over come to basically pay homage and pay respect to Gray, and so this is their relative, so they got to see how important his work was, at least to these people. So it was just a great. It was actually kind of a real warm and fuzzy event because of that.
Good. What is the most important item I should have from your store, from your museum?
Oh, like that you can buy?
Yeah.
Uh,
Should it be a shirt or should it be the statue you just held up?
It's either this guy, it's either one of these, or a T-shirt. And I like the T-shirts because I hate to say it this way, but I like it when people volunteer to become a walking billboard. So, T-shirt.
It's good promotion, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I think I'll just purchase one of those shirts and that guy too.
Okay.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. It was a blessing to hear from you. Keep the faith. You're doing a good job. You're a good voice. And anytime you want to reach out, I'll probably have questions here and there.
Okay.
So that's what I'm here for. I'm sure that's what you're there for in your museum.
Yeah.
Doing a great job with that place. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for being a part of the Ropen Network.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, and feel free to reach out anytime. So, the Flatwoods Monster incident took place on September 12th, 1952. Can you tell me anything and everything that you remember about that day specifically, even if it doesn't necessarily relate to, I know that you received a phone call, but even if it doesn't relate to that phone call, maybe anything out of the ordinary happening that day, and then going through to when you got the phone call and that night? Basically, can you just tell me the story of that day?
Well, to start with, Kathleen called the jail. Kathleen Lemons called the jail. And I did take the phone call, and she was very excited about something was out there in the meadow, in the field, and she thought it was something from outer space. Well, I told her to hold on, and I went and got Dad, and he talked to her for a little bit. And then when they hung up, Dad called the sheriff. At that time was Bob Carr. He lived down in Gasaway. And he came up, and he and Dad went out there and looked around and whatever. The only thing that I can remember my dad ever really saying anything about it was, he says, there was no doubt in my mind that there was something out there. He says, because the grass was all beat down and kind of seared. He said, but there was something. He says, I don't know what it was, but they actually saw something.
Did he ever relate to you maybe how big an area of grass that he was, referring to?
No, it was quite large. It wasn't just a small place. It was quite large.
Would it be like feet or yards, or if you just had to guess, or maybe compare it to something else size wise, if you know.
Well, I don't really know, but I know at that time I surmised that it was a very large circle.
Wow. Is there anything you can recall, specifically? Like, let's say if somebody asked you to try to recount, word for word the conversation you had with Miss May, back and forth. Do you think you could do that, or maybe give a general idea?
I just know she was very excited. But no, I don't remember the conversation.
Join us again next time as we dive deeper into the realm of the unknown. Until then, seek the truth.